The highly acclaimed classic movie Citizen Kane, made way back in 1941, depicts the life of billionaire industrialist and media magnate Tom Kane. The story spans the life of Kane from humble beginnings to enormous wealth and success. All the while, however, plagued by insecurity, broken relationships, and a struggle to find happiness, even amid his enormous financial success. One might wonder what a film that's almost 100 years old has to do with cutting-edge technological advances that have spawned things like cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and the onset of the Metaverse. The parallels stem from one thing that never changes, regardless of time or technology: the desires of the human heart. His whole life, Tom Kane was searching for the very same things that we all often search for, regardless of where we live, where we're from, or where we work: wealth, novelty, utility. Those drivers that compel some to professional success, others to Olympic glory, and others to bigger houses and longer holidays are the very same drivers that have driven the digital revolution and the development of what we know as Web3 technologies. The human search for these three things is perpetual, but the data and our lived experiences suggest that they are not enough. Even as our wealth, novelty, and utility markers stack up, we continue to struggle. However, we rarely step back to reassess our search for happiness. The human desire for wealth, novelty, and utility, among other things, is often channeled through the latest in technology. So it is with what's broadly referred to as Web3 technologies. Now, these are a new generation of internet-related digital disruptions that include the decentralization and deregulation of online experiences, finance, and our digital engagement. The questions that present themselves are as ubiquitous as the technologies themselves. We are presented with more and more products, services, devices, and experiences. More things are automated, and we are told to do more and more through our screens rather than in person. Life is certainly getting faster and more efficient, but I think there are questions being left unanswered. How can we make sense of whether new technologies are always a good idea? Are they good or bad for us? And can we assess that based on their speed and convenience alone? And what do they tell us about ourselves? Cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and the emergence of the Metaverse signifies the largest leap in modern computing since the invention of the microchip. By way of very brief introduction and summary, the Metaverse refers to digital interfaces and locations through which people can experience various aspects of life online through virtual reality technologies. We've seen many aspects of this already mainstreamed. When techies talk about the Metaverse, they're talking about fuller scale virtual reality. This means that more and more of our physical human experiences become virtual digital experiences. Everything from shopping, driving, dancing, socializing, walking, meeting, even buying real estate and yachts. That's just a quick outline and summary of a number of emerging technologies that are often collectively referred to as the Metaverse. What about cryptocurrency? Put simply, it's about the privatization of money through digital currency. For most of its history, the value of money, as we all know it, has been assigned and affirmed by some kind of external authority, usually a government, a king, a queen, a monetary authority, or some kind of national reserve bank. Because that external authority determines what constitutes money, people can then use it to buy and sell goods and services. Digital cryptocurrencies, however, try to take that authority out of the picture. The idea is that a limited amount of a particular digital currency, like Bitcoin for example, is generated through complex computing calculations. It then exists in the digital world, not physically and digitally, like traditional money, which is sometimes called fiat money or currency. However, just like fiat currency, these new digital cryptocurrencies are scarce, meaning that there's a limited amount of it out there. Therefore, it has value. It also offers some alleged benefits because of something called blockchain technology. Now, blockchain technology represents a shared online ledger that perfectly documents the logging or transacting of something. The idea is that every piece of digital cryptocurrency is perfectly accounted for, and any transfers related to the currency is accounted for too. So we always know who has what. Of course, blockchain technology has various other applications too. Beyond banking and finance, it promises all kinds of potential improvements in accountability and efficiency in law, voting, education, healthcare, and much more. But there are other challenges that come with this, including things like money laundering, the lack of traceability, and the enabling of actors to be anonymous and unaccountable in the system. There's much more that could be said, but that's enough for now. These three broad categories of technology, the metaverse, privatized digital cryptocurrencies, and blockchain technology, are examples of Web3 technologies that are likely to have continued and growing influence in modern society. For their proponents, these digital advances promise better experiences, better accountability, and better lives. But is there something we're missing? Our phones are better, our TVs are better, our social media accounts are busier. But according to the data we have from the OECD, which is the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, pretty much the world's wealthiest nations, material prosperity, novelty, and utility doesn't necessarily lead to happier or more mentally and emotionally healthy people. Why? The industrial, computing, and communications revolutions have empowered us to be our best selves, or so we're told. But we continue to grapple with insecurities, with anxieties, with loneliness, and with suffering. What is missing from the modern idea that we should look deep inside for the answers we seek? And is there an alternative? With these questions in mind, let's now turn to three things that offer a framework through which we can think about how we might make sense of cryptocurrency, fintech, and the metaverse, and work out how all of this might be related to the idea of human flourishing. The search for wealth, the search for novelty, and the search for utility. Firstly, the search for wealth. Before the Industrial Revolution, which is generally accepted as taking off in the 1700s, global annual economic growth averaged around 0.1%. As those in the field would know, this is essentially negligible. It's a rounding error. Effectively, as a species, we weren't particularly effective at generating large amounts of wealth for the vast majority of our history. But then things changed significantly. Since the first Industrial Revolution began, global economic wealth creation has been, on average at least, around 4% per year. That's a 40-fold increase in the human generation of wealth. No matter what your income, a 40-fold increase would change the way you think about money. This reflects the significance of the adjustment that humankind has been going through for around 350 years now. It's meant a significant psychological and sociological shift. And while it's undoubtedly improved our quality of life, with things like the printing press, the internal combustion engine, human flight, electricity, indoor plumbing, and of course, more recently, the computing, digital and communications revolutions, it's also posed challenges that we continue to grapple with. There's a lot more money around. There's a lot more stuff around. And we're all scrambling to get more of it and to improve the quality and convenience of our lives. Modern advances in financial technology and digital currency are just another iteration of our drive for wealth and efficiency. In and of itself, this is not a problem. However, there's more to the story. The world is increasingly uncertain and volatile. Economic contractions, supply chain constraints, geopolitical turbulence, pandemics, and many more tectonic uncertainties make wealth creation and protection of it increasingly perilous. Black swan events, it seems, are increasingly common. The term black swan refers to an event that defies our models, our predictions, and our conventional understanding. It was perhaps most recently popularized by the commentator Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his book Black Swan. However, what's increasingly clear is that modern times are throwing up more and more black swans. From 9/11 to the global financial crisis, to COVID, to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with greater wealth has come more uncertainty. Another problem we seem to be facing is that this continuous drive for wealth has become more and more central to our measures of success and our markers of identity. As the great writer Oscar Wilde said, "The god of this century is wealth. To be successful, you must have wealth." Now, Wilde was writing in the 20th century, admittedly. However, while financial and digital technologies have advanced indescribably since then, the individual and collective reality of human greed hasn't seemed to have moved at all. An example is that the world's two leading cryptocurrency billionaires as of a couple of years ago, the former CEOs of FTX and Binance, which are online cryptocurrency exchanges, both of these guys received jail sentences for fraud-related behaviour. It seems that the promise of perfect trust that blockchain and other technologies promised our financial system just couldn't get past the reality of human greed. It doesn't take an expert to see that when it comes to greed, anthropology trumps technology. There's another problem with wealth too. For those of us fortunate enough to accumulate wealth, it doesn't seem to lead to fulfilment in the ways that we hoped it would. Research such as Harvard University's ongoing longitudinal study on life satisfaction and well-being shows that financial accumulation isn't a statistically significant factor in human fulfilment. There is something else that is far more important than people satisfying our search for wealth, whether it's through new technologies or otherwise. Relationality. People are relational before they are materialistic. We need each other more than we need wealth. Secondly, the search for novelty. We all like new experiences. From television to new holiday destinations, from new ice cream flavours to the explosion of live streaming content, the human search for escape, distraction, and novelty is seemingly endless. Web3 technologies are no exception. The promises of the Metaverse, a synthetic digital environment through which to virtually experience more and more of human life, caters directly to our search for novelty. However, we should not let our distractions distract us. Albert Einstein famously remarked that it has become appallingly obvious that our technology has surpassed our humanity. His point holds true across generations. Our moral imperfections are unchanged in the face of technological breakthroughs. Our experiences are increasingly novel, but our struggles, loneliness, divorce, anxiety, crime, oppression, poverty, inequality, are unmoved. Blockchain technology, through a virtual shared ledger, provides an enormous breakthrough to make corruption in transaction almost impossible. However, blockchain technology is often incorrectly talked about as enhancing trust or achieving perfect trust. By contrast, it offers enhanced accountability but reflects low trust. We trust the ledger because we can't trust each other. Our intrinsic brokenness remains. Our need for blockchain and related technologies does not increase trust. It caters to our lack of trustworthiness, and our need for an answer to our moral brokenness remains. Undoubtedly, new technologies offer incredible advances in our quality of life and in our ability to alleviate suffering. Everything from cutting-edge cancer treatments to more comfortable and efficient cars to more and faster live streaming options on our growing stable of screens, novelty isn't always bad. The problem seems to happen when, in the words of that old Christian master philosopher, St. Augustine, our search for novelty becomes a disordered love. We become distracted by the next thing and the new thing, and as a result, we forget about the deeper things that we all need. Author and commentator Neil Postman, in his book Amusing Ourselves to Death, prophetically warns of a society in which humankind is reduced to little more than our instincts to escape reality, ignore reality, and settle for increasingly superficial and mind-numbing forms of entertainment. While this is a pretty bleak outlook, if we're being honest, I think we can all see aspects of our lives, or at the very least, glimpses of our lives, where these risks might play out. The bottom line is that novelty is not a bad thing, but it's not enough. We need some kind of a pathway to redemption, more than we need novelty. Thirdly and finally, the search for utility. John Stuart Mill, one of the intellectual godfathers of liberalism, the idea that the freer people are, the happier they will be, famously said that the primary purpose of freedom is to optimize utility. So what is utility? Different definitions exist, of course. Mill himself is best known for a particular type of utilitarianism known as rule utilitarianism. This is the idea that we should generally follow rules and ethical principles that generally promote the greatest happiness for all of us. Mill's idea is about looking at long-term consequences of the principles that we're using, rather than looking at individual ethical moments in isolation. For Mill, some pleasures are superior to others. They are qualitatively better. We have to look at the big picture. Another distinct but related type of utilitarianism is that of Jeremy Bentham and similar thinkers to him. His idea, in some contrast to Mill, was that the moral value of any action can be determined by how much pleasure or pain it produces right now. That's the only real calculus that matters in ethics: immediate pain versus immediate pleasure. Of course, there are other variations on utilitarianism, but those of Mill, Bentham and others all have some common ground. That how we decide what to do as individuals and as a society should be broadly driven by the optimization of financial, health, education and employment outcomes. This in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. The efficient and productive allocation of resources is the best way to generate wealth, to improve the quality of life of as many people as possible, and to alleviate suffering. Regardless of what one's political opinion might be, it's pretty much impossible to deny the incredible benefits that have flowed from free market principles in relation to epic global reductions in poverty, increases in education, and access to digital technologies. All of this has flowed, at least to some degree, from the principles of making things as good as possible for as many people as possible. That is, the idea that utility is defined as aggregate happiness or pleasure. However, as modern thinkers like Michael Sandel, Os Guinness and Alistair McIntyre have contended, a blind and purposeless search for utility tends to commodify things, including people. Everyone and everything becomes raw material for the broader ideal of economic productivity and utility growth. The problem with this effort to quantify the pathways to human fulfillment is that statistically, our metrics of utility have failed to match our desire for flourishing. By way of example, the Singapore Business Review published a survey that Singapore, a city-state with some of the highest metrics of financial, educational, and employment outcomes, has one of the world's unhappiest workforces. It may well be that the metaverse improves our life, health and education outcomes, but all indicators available point to the continued, inevitable need for something beyond utility. It has been said that Mark Twain, the author, famously declared that the two most important days in a person's life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. Twain's statement is countercultural. In a world that links flourishing to utility, Twain suggests that flourishing is contingent on something else: purpose. His insight seems prescient. To determine the success of a map, a car, a surfboard, or a computer, we must first know why it was made. So it is with people. We must transcend our search for utility with a discernment and fulfillment of our purpose. So what? Our research, our experiences, and our hearts point to the three realizations posited above. We need to transcend our search for wealth with relationality, our search for novelty with a more enduring source of happiness, and our search for utility with purpose. Technology can help us, but it's inadequate in rising to meet these demands. We need to transcend our search for wealth with relationality, our search for novelty with a more enduring source of happiness, and our search for utility with purpose. Technology can help, but it's not enough. Audaciously and refreshingly though, the Christian message offers to do all three. It declares that people were made for two purposes: to be in loving relationship with God and to be in loving relationships with one another. It declares that the first precedes the second, and that through a relationship with God, people can receive redemption from our brokenness. This confluence of relationality, redemption, and purpose is astonishing. It helps us make sense of technology, to use it, but to put it in its correct place. Tom Kane, in the movie Citizen Kane, had almost every kind of success one could hope for, but he died longing for something else. His wealth was a good thing, but it wasn't enough. So it is with technology. Wealth, novelty, and utility are good things, but they're just not enough. The Christian message, and more specifically, the idea of God stepping into the world as a person, Jesus Christ, and dying on a cross in order to take onto himself the brokenness, darkness, and struggles of humankind, offers a powerful recalibration of the amoral paradigm of flourishing, offered by the ideals of modern techno-utopia. Jesus Christ destroys the idea that self-interest, convenience, novelty, and utility should be our primary moral drivers. Instead, he offers the countercultural beauty of sacrificial love, inverting any algorithmic commitment to optimize for outcomes based on efficiency and ease. By stark contrast, the cross is God himself, stepping into his creation, humbling himself, sacrificing himself, not for wealth, novelty, or utility, but for us. Our search for flourishing and fulfillment amid the digital revolution sits, as it always has, not within the technological realm, but by following a longing for the transcendent.